New York, 1890. The city shrouded in winter fog, gas lamps flickering along cobblestone streets. A night so cold that every breath turned to white mist. In the shadows, a crime unfolded that sent shivers through all who had once admired the Vandermeer family. Not because of wealth, but because of the dark secrets lurking within the grand halls of their mansion. One person disappeared. Singular disappearance. Fate unknown. Rumors spread like wildfire across Manhattan. Some claimed to see fleeting shadows past the windows, strange sounds echoing through empty rooms, whispers and cries fading into nothing as if no one remained to hear them. Contemporary newspapers reported cautiously yet hauntingly mysterious occurrence, shocking scandal, unusual behavior among family members. Police files revealed that journals and key evidence had vanished, leaving an empty mansion steeped in unanswered questions. Residents whispered that those expansive halls and gilded rooms held more than gold and jewels, a ghostly presence, an untold story, a whisper no one dared acknowledge. Servants recalled strange events, footsteps moving across the floor at midnight, laughter echoing when no one was present, lights flickering as if winking at someone from a closed door. Some believed that the family themselves, intoxicated with power, staged spectral spectacles to conceal their crimes. Every testimony conflicted, every piece of evidence disappeared. The deeper people dug, the darker the story grew, a black hole swallowing the truth whole. The surrounding neighborhood was starkly different. Poor, struggling streets, where the lower classes battled cold and hunger. They looked up at the Vandermeer mansion with envy, fear, and rumors that anyone who entered might never return. Children spoke of a shadow figure appearing on freezing nights. Adults whispered of the curse of the wealthy. Yet no one knew whether it was reality or imagination born of fear. The earliest newspaper reports described the incident with restrained but icy language, emphasizing that this was no ordinary crime. A brazen act right in Manhattan, occurring within a family thought untouchable by scandal. And yet the singular disappearance occurred, fate unknown hanging over the city. People questioned whether it was tied to illicit activities, secretive plots among wealthy dynasties, or the result of individual madness. Rumors of strange occurrences spread, invisible footsteps echoing on wooden floors, doors opening and closing by themselves, flickering lights in empty rooms. Some believed the spirits of previous victims, those buried by past scandals, still lingered, watching, warning, reminding all of the price of power and ambition. Folklore, superstition, ghost tales gradually merged with the cold fact layer, missing evidence, hidden journals, conflicting testimonies, all combining into a surreal tableau where reality and legend intertwined. And even when the sun rose, when the fog lifted, and Manhattan began to stir, the darkness of the Vandermeer family remained, secrets hidden behind black lacquered walls, heavy velvet drapes, and the yellow flicker of antique gas lamps. Locals occasionally glanced up, wondering, shivering, who committed the crime, who hid the truth, and would these secrets ever be revealed? The winter of 1890 had settled over New York like a heavy shroud, draping the city in icy stillness. The streets, slick with frost, reflected the flickering gaslights in uneven pools, and the air carried a silence that was almost unnatural, pierced only by the distant clatter of a horse-drawn carriage. It was the Gilded Age, a time when the glittering facades of wealth masked a darker, more turbulent reality. Within the city's elite circles, families like the Vandermeers were revered, their power unchallenged, their influence pervasive in every political and financial corner of Manhattan. Yet beneath this veneer of sophistication, the Vandermeer household harbored secrets so deep that the very walls seemed to absorb them, whispering rumors to those daring enough to listen. The Vandermeer mansion itself was a monument to opulence, towering ceilings adorned with gilded moldings, velvet drapes cascading over expansive windows, and crystal chandeliers that caught and fractured the soft glow of candlelight. Servants whispered of rooms that no outsider was permitted to enter, chambers filled with locked cabinets, thick leather-bound journals, and safes whose contents were never disclosed. The architecture was designed to impress, to overwhelm visitors with the family's grandeur. Yet for those who lingered too long in the shadowed corners, the mansion exuded an aura of unease, a sense that every corridor might conceal not just wealth, but unspoken horrors. Outside the gates, the city itself was a study in contrasts. The bustling avenues teemed with carriages, merchants, and laborers, many of whom struggled to survive in tenements that barely shielded them from the winter chill. Street children darted through the alleys, clutching stolen firewood, and beggars huddled in doorways, their eyes reflecting both fear and fascination as they glimpsed the Vandermeer estate above the skyline. Whispers spread quickly among the populous tales of lights flickering in empty rooms, muffled cries heard in the dead of night, shadows moving independently of their sources. Folklore had already begun to attach itself to the house, blending the fear of the unknown with the very real knowledge of wealth's corrupting influence. City newspapers chronicled these events with a tone both cautious and tantalizing. Headlines hinted at scandal without naming names, recounting mysterious disappearances and strange occurrences within Manhattan's elite households. Reporters relied on fragments, a diary entry found in the street testimony from a nervous servant, a ledger that hinted at transactions too sordid to explain. The fact layer began to emerge from these scattered traces, a skeleton of events that suggested malfeasant secrecy and perhaps violence. Yet every piece of evidence seemed partial, incomplete, as if the mansion itself had conspired to erase the truth. Local residents told stories that blurred the line between fact and legend. They spoke of shadow figures glimpsed in the corner of a room, pale shapes moving silently across candlelit floors. A mother claimed her child had seen a face pressed against the window at midnight, eyes wide, lips mouthing words that no one could hear. Others reported hearing the sound of footsteps pacing the hallways when the mansion was supposedly empty. These tales, passed along in hushed tones in the taverns and markets of the city, lent an almost spectral weight to the narrative, making the Vandermeer household not just a site of human intrigue, but a locus of urban legend. Even within the family, tension and secrecy reigned. Letters intercepted by curious servants revealed coded communications and references to meetings with influential figures in both politics and business. The Vandermeer patriarch, a man of imposing presence and sharp intellect, was rumored to have exerted control over every aspect of his household, enforcing silence with threats, bribes, or worse. Yet the precise details remained elusive. Every testimony contained contradictions. Every journal, if it survived, was cryptic, fragmentary. The fact layer was tantalizing but incomplete, leaving gaps filled only by imagination, rumor, and fear. The social backdrop intensified the stakes. Manhattan's elite were obsessed with reputation, the preservation of family honor, and the concealment of scandal. A single misstep could ruin a lineage, erase fortunes, or invite public disgrace. And so secrets were layered upon secrets, each carefully hidden, each story guarded by veils of wealth and influence. Folklore fed on this obsession, producing tales of curses, restless spirits, and retribution that transcended the mortal plane. The mansion became not merely a home, but a symbol, a nexus where wealth, power, fear, and the supernatural converged. Reports of the Vandermeer disappearance spread beyond the city. Gossip reached New Jersey, Connecticut, and even Philadelphia. Each retelling added embellishments: the servant who vanished after hearing a scream, the locked room with a shattered window, the candle snuffed out by an unseen hand. Fact and legend intertwined, creating a narrative that was part history, part myth. Yet every account reinforced the sense that the mansion itself was complicit, a silent witness to events that the world could never fully grasp. By the end of the first week, the city was gripped by a mixture of fascination and dread. Street corners buzzed with speculation. Taverns echoed with whispered accounts, and families spoke in guarded tones about the house of horrors atop the hill. Each observer wondered what truths lay behind those gilded walls, how much of the darkness was human, and how much was something else entirely. The line between fact layer and folklore layer blurred further, and the mystery deepened. Even as winter gave way to early spring, the Vandermeer mansion remained a focal point of both intrigue and fear. Investigators combed the grounds, following leads that led nowhere, uncovering partial evidence only to have it disappear again. Servants who had worked there for decades provided conflicting testimony. The city could not decide whether it was witnessing the aftermath of a human crime, the machinations of a powerful dynasty, or something more supernatural. And in that uncertainty, the story took on a life of its own, growing with each retelling whispered through generations. The investigation into the Vandermeer mansion began in earnest as the city woke to the full gravity of the disappearance. Detectives arrived, notebooks in hand, lanterns casting long shadows across the frost-lined streets. They examined the ornate front doors, the grand hallways, and the sweeping staircases. But every surface seemed meticulously scrubbed, every object accounted for, except for the one thing that mattered most: the person who had vanished. Testimony from servants provided fragmented details: footsteps heard in empty corridors, whispers between rooms that seemed to carry messages no one could interpret, keys misplaced, and then returned to their proper hooks, as if by unseen hands. The fact layer began to take shape, a skeleton of events obscured by deliberate obfuscation, human error, and perhaps fear itself. Journal entries found in the public archives hinted at a tension within the family that outsiders could scarcely comprehend. Cryptic references to the matter of last winter and the consequences that must remain hidden suggested that the disappearance was not an isolated incident but part of a larger orchestrated effort to conceal wrongdoing. Interviews with neighbors painted a similarly eerie picture. The Vandermeer children were seen moving silently through the halls at odd hours, while the adults conducted meetings behind locked doors, the murmured words carrying a weight that suggested more than ordinary family matters. Folklore quickly intertwined with these facts. Some whispered that the mansion was haunted, that the very walls absorbed human suffering and reflected it back as shadowy figures and ghostly sounds. A local baker recounted seeing a pale hand pressed against a window late at night, a hand that seemed not quite human. Tavern-goers told tales of footsteps pacing in locked rooms, of doors slamming without wind, of candles extinguished by invisible fingers. These stories passed quietly from mouth to mouth, added layers of fear and mystique, making the mansion a locus not only of human intrigue, but of supernatural speculation. In the family's private correspondence, fragments of letters revealed subtle threats and veiled warnings. The patriarch, a man known for his iron grip on both household and business affairs, appeared to have monitored every movement within the mansion. Subtle pressures were applied to servants, financial leverage used against acquaintances, and rumors suggestive of more sinister motives circulated among the elite. Fact layer evidence suggested coercion, manipulation, and potentially violence, but the details remained frustratingly elusive. Every diary entry, ledger, or note that surfaced seemed incomplete, as if someone had carefully edited reality to protect the family's image. The human element was equally complex. Witnesses described the missing individual as quiet, reserved, yet perceptive, someone who may have stumbled upon truths too dangerous to reveal. Neighbors spoke of brief glimpses through windows, a face at the glass eyes wide with fear, lips moving silently as if forming words that would never reach the outside world. These small human moments contrasted sharply with the grandiose cold architecture of the mansion, revealing the tension between intimate tragedy and public spectacle. Meanwhile, the city's press fanned the flames of curiosity and dread. Articles were printed with careful language, avoiding explicit accusation yet suggesting scandal, a disappearance most singular. Events shrouded in secrecy. The powerful House of Vandermeer. Readers speculated endlessly. Was this an internal family feud, a cover-up of criminal activity, or perhaps the result of an accident so bizarre it defied explanation? Folklore began to merge with reporting the shadowy figure at the window, becoming both a literal and symbolic presence in the narrative, a representation of the unknown that lurked within opulence. Further testimony revealed contradictions, amplifying the tension. Servants who had worked in different wings reported entirely different accounts of the same night. Some spoke of muffled screams, others of a calm and empty house. One longtime gardener recalled seeing a carriage leave the estate at an unusual hour, the driver behaving as though under duress. Meanwhile, a neighbor claimed to have glimpsed a lantern light moving unnaturally across the top floor, a movement that could not be explained by human behavior alone. These discrepancies intensified the sense of mystery, suggesting either deliberate deceit or phenomena that defied logical explanation. The mansion's layout itself contributed to the eerie narrative. Hidden alcoves, concealed staircases, and secret rooms created spaces where events could unfold unseen. Detectives noted that some areas seemed designed more for concealment than convenience, as though the architecture itself facilitated secrecy. Servants were often restricted from certain rooms, while children were rumored to play in corridors that led to nowhere, their games perhaps unknowingly tracing paths along which secrets had been carried and concealed. The mansion became a character in its own right, a silent witness, a participant in the unfolding tragedy. Even ordinary objects seemed to take on significance. A ledger missing pages, a silver candlestick turned over a cracked mirror reflecting a distorted image of the grand hall. Each artifact hinted at human intent and error, blending fact with the eerie suggestions of folklore. Shadows seemed to move independently, and the mansion's dim corners appeared to harbor shapes and figures that observers could not explain. Residents spoke of cold drafts where no windows were open, whispers in the hallways when no one was present. These human experiences, both mundane and inexplicable, reinforced the narrative of a household steeped in mystery. And yet, despite the mounting evidence and whispered stories, the truth remained frustratingly out of reach. Fact and legend intertwined to form a narrative that was at once compelling and terrifying. The Vandermeer family maintained their public composure while the city around them buzzed with speculation, fear, and fascination. Each revelation raised new questions, and each rumor seemed to confirm suspicions too unsettling to confront directly. The human scene was as much about what was seen as what was hidden, about lives interrupted, and about the shadows cast by power and secrecy. By the end of this first stage of investigation, the Vandermeer mansion had become synonymous with enigma. Every witness, every piece of evidence, and every whispered story contributed to a growing tapestry of intrigue. The city could only wonder what had truly happened behind those gilded walls, who was responsible, and what motives lay beneath the surface. The line between human agency and something more spectral blurred, leaving the observer in a state of uneasy anticipation, yearning to uncover the truths that might never fully be revealed. As the investigation deepened, the trail grew colder, and yet paradoxically more ominous. Each discovery seemed to peel back a layer of the Vandermeer family's carefully constructed facade, revealing a network of secrets that intertwined ambition, fear, and the grotesque. Detectives scoured hidden chambers, lifted rugs, and inspected ornate cabinets, but every clue led to more questions than answers. Documents were missing, letters had been altered, and physical evidence, objects that might have held answers, was mysteriously gone. The fact layer was a puzzle with pieces deliberately removed, leaving investigators grasping at fragments. Witnesses began to recount details that were increasingly surreal. A housemaid claimed she saw the missing individual in a hall lined with portraits. Yet when she returned with authorities, the hallway appeared empty and undisturbed. Another servant recalled hearing muffled conversations behind a locked door, voices whispering urgently about debts of blood and loyalty. Yet when the door was opened, silence and dust were the only occupants. These human testimonies were fraught with tension, contradictory, and sometimes chillingly consistent in their strange, almost ritualistic patterns. Folklore had by now taken a firm hold among the local populace. Shadows in the windows, cold drafts, footsteps echoing in empty halls all became emblematic of the house itself. Tavern stories spoke of a figure in white gliding through the mansion's upper floors, an apparition some claimed to have seen for several consecutive nights. Others whispered of objects moving on their own chairs, nudged as if by invisible hands, doors opening to reveal rooms that had been previously locked. These tales passed through hushed conversations, fed a growing mythology entwining fact and legend into an inseparable whole. The family's internal dynamics emerged as equally complex and unsettling. Letters recovered from acquaintances hinted at coercion, manipulation, and intimidation pressures applied to servants and outsiders alike. One letter, partially burned, referenced a necessary concealment and alluded to acts that, if revealed, could ruin not just a reputation, but a dynasty. The Vandermeer patriarch's influence extended beyond the home. The family was enmeshed with political figures and financiers who may have facilitated silence or at the very least obscured the truth. Fact and folklore layers intersected in these shadows, creating a dense fog of ambiguity. Neighbor accounts painted a similarly chilling picture. At night, the mansion seemed alive with activity, curtains moving though windows were closed, faint lights flickering from rooms that should have been dark. A watchman reported seeing a carriage leave the estate at an improbable hour, the driver's behavior strange, almost mechanical. Street vendors spoke of figures watching from above, peering through the upper windows with expressions that made the onlookers shiver. These human observations, corroborated in part by official records, suggested that the house was a theater of events that defied ordinary explanation. Meanwhile, the missing individual's friends and acquaintances added layers to the mystery. They described a person acutely aware of their surroundings, cautious and perhaps fearful. It seemed that the individual had discovered a truth so dangerous it could not be disclosed. Attempts to trace their movements ended in dead ends, abandoned carriages, letters, unanswered whispers of sightings that could not be verified. Each human account contributed to a narrative that was simultaneously tangible and surreal, a blend of the observable and the speculative. Journal fragments and recovered records offered glimpses into what might have transpired. There were references to meetings at odd hours, discussions of debts and obligations that stretched into moral ambiguity, and passages that hinted at fear of exposure, fear of betrayal, fear of consequences too severe to endure. Investigators noted that the handwriting in several entries was inconsistent, suggesting that someone had intentionally altered or falsified portions of the records. Each revelation created new layers of suspicion, uncertainty, and dread. Superstition continued to color the interpretation of facts. Residents spoke of cold spots that accompanied the movement of certain family members, of shadows that seemed to linger longer than physics allowed, of inexplicable noises echoing through empty corridors. Some claimed to see faces in the gilded mirrors, distorted and fleeting, as if reflecting a past that refused to remain hidden. These accounts, while unverified, became intertwined with the hard evidence blurring the boundary between human culpability and the supernatural, between deliberate concealment and inexplicable phenomena. As investigators attempted to piece together a timeline, contradictions became more pronounced. Statements, conflicted observations did not align, and yet patterns emerged. Nocturnal activity concentrated on specific floors, repeated mentions of missing documents, and cryptic notes suggesting an awareness of an unseen observer. Every attempt at clarity seemed to lead deeper into ambiguity. The mansion itself appeared almost complicit, a participant in a drama of power, secrecy, and fear. The city outside remained captivated. Citizens speculated endlessly, blending facts with rumor, who had the motive, who had the means, and what forces beyond comprehension might be involved. Even those with little direct knowledge of the Vandermeer family felt the pervasive weight of mystery, the sense that something beyond human reckoning was at play. The line between fact layer and folklore layer grew thinner with each retelling. By the close of this stage of the investigation, the Vandermeer mansion had transformed from a house of wealth into a symbol, a locus of fear, intrigue, and dark fascination. Human actions, both observed and inferred, intertwined with ghostly tales and unexplainable phenomena. The payoff of the inquiry was tantalizingly incomplete, leaving investigators and citizens alike suspended between what was known and what was feared. The mansion loomed as a testament to the dangers of unchecked power, hidden truths, and secrets that refused to remain buried. The nights that followed grew colder, heavier, and more oppressive within the Vandermeer mansion. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the walls, bending corners and doorways into shapes that defied reason. Investigators reported that the hallways themselves seemed to shift, rooms appearing differently depending on the observer's path. The air was thick with a tension that could almost be felt pressing on the chest, a weight of anticipation, fear, and unspoken knowledge. Every creak of floorboard, every whisper of wind through the chimneys seemed amplified, as if the house itself were aware of intruders. Servants, already unsettled by prior events, began reporting incidents so bizarre that rational explanations faltered. Candles extinguished, mid-flame doors locked from the inside without anyone present. Footsteps circling rooms in patterns that no human could achieve alone. One maid swore she had glimpsed a figure in the corner of the ballroom, tall, pale, with eyes that glimmered in the lamplight, a presence so fleeting that by the time she alerted others, it had vanished. Yet the sensation of being watched, of being assessed by an invisible gaze, lingered long after the figure disappeared. Meanwhile, detectives uncovered a hidden room behind a false panel in the library. Within it lay fragments of documents, some burned, some torn, some cryptically coded. Partial ledgers referenced sums of money, exchanged meetings at unrecorded hours, and warnings about those who would not remain silent. A diary partially singed spoke of fear, desperation, and acts done in the dead of night to preserve appearances. Each fragment reinforced the sense that the Vandermeer family had orchestrated an elaborate scheme, one that involved manipulation, coercion, and perhaps acts too dark to contemplate fully. Neighbors and observers continued to add to the unsettling atmosphere. Street vendors recalled hearing faint cries late at night, muffled but unmistakable, emanating from the direction of the mansion. A young boy claimed to have seen a carriage leave the estate with a single hooded figure whose identity could not be discerned. Tavern gossip intertwined with these reports, turning fact into legend and legend into a shared fear that gripped the community. The folklore layer had fused seamlessly with the fact layer, creating a narrative that was both tangible and spectral. As more evidence emerged, contradictions deepened. Some witnesses reported hearing whispered arguments between family members while others swore the house was silent. Letters recovered from former acquaintances hinted at external influence, politicians, financiers, and rivals who may have had stakes in maintaining secrecy. Yet none could confirm the full scope. The human element fraught with fear, loyalty, and self-preservation added another layer of opacity. Each human testimony, partial or conflicting, became a piece in a puzzle with missing and possibly misleading pieces. The mansion itself seemed to participate in the drama. Investigators noted that certain rooms were accessible only through hidden passages, staircases that appeared to serve no practical purpose, doors that opened onto walls. One detective reported feeling a sudden chill as he approached a hallway, the hairs on his arms standing on end, a sensation that defied explanation. Shadows moved across ceilings in ways that made no sense, and the faint scent of smoke and candle wax mingled with something acrid and unidentifiable. The architecture, the environment, the human presence all conspired to amplify unease and uncertainty. Within the family, tensions escalated. The patriarch's control over information, behavior, and narrative became increasingly apparent. Servants were interrogated, coerced, and dismissed. Letters were censored or destroyed. Meetings were conducted in secrecy. Each action suggested an awareness that the stakes were higher than mere social embarrassment, possibly life and death, reputation, and the maintenance of power. Fear became both shield and weapon, a force that permeated the walls, influencing behavior and shaping the unfolding narrative. In the surrounding community, whispers transformed into vivid recollections. Shadows at windows, glimpses of figures in hallways, cries that seemed to emanate from empty rooms, all became markers of a legend in the making. Folklore reinforced the suspense, giving rise to a shared consciousness of dread and fascination. People reported seeing the pale figure in the ballroom glimpsed fleetingly through the cracks of the door. They spoke of faint music, haunting and discordant, as if the house itself were mocking those who dared investigate. Even the investigators, trained and rational, began to question their senses. Notes went missing, evidence was tampered with, and timelines conflicted. Objects moved inexplicably, candles extinguished without wind, and strange patterns emerged on the floorboards. It became increasingly difficult to separate deliberate concealment from phenomena that defied explanation. Each new discovery seemed to draw the observer deeper into the mansion's mystery, a labyrinth of fear, manipulation, and possibly something beyond human comprehension. By the height of the investigation, the mansion had become a theater of extremes, human ambition clashing with human fear, fact interwoven with legend, the tangible merging with the spectral. Every creaking floorboard, every whispered account, every fragment of paper contributed to a climax of tension, leaving those who observed, investigated, or even merely heard the story suspended in awe, uncertainty, and a subtle terror that lingered long after the candlelight faded. The Vandermeer mansion had revealed its darkest truths, yet the full scope remained elusive, tantalizing and terrifying, a crescendo of human and perhaps inhuman intrigue that demanded attention, reflection, and fear. By the time investigators had pieced together the fragments of evidence, the mansion itself had become a monument to human obsession, greed, and secrecy. The so-called payoff of the investigation was neither tidy nor complete. It was instead a tapestry of partial truths, contradictions, and lingering questions. Documents recovered offered tantalizing glimpses into financial transactions, threats, and obscure agreements, yet crucial pages remained missing, burned, or deliberately obfuscated. Each new piece of information illuminated more shadows than light, reinforcing the sense that the Vandermeer family's influence had extended far beyond the mansion's walls. Accounts from neighbors, servants, and former acquaintances converged to form a mosaic of eerie consistency. Patterns emerged. Certain rooms were consistently reported as centers of unexplained activity. Objects were found displaced despite meticulous order, and faint traces of hurried movement were detected in areas previously considered inaccessible. The fact layer revealed a web of human machinations, coercion, and perhaps complicity. It was evident that the disappearance had not been a single act but the culmination of careful planning, human fear, and relentless control over perception. Yet alongside the cold facts, the folklore layer persisted. Stories of shadowy figures, pale apparitions, and inexplicable sounds remained vivid in the minds of those who had witnessed or believed they had witnessed the unexplainable. A lantern seen moving across the upper floors, whispers echoing in empty corridors, and glimpses of faces in mirrors that should have reflected nothing. Each account, while anecdotal, reinforced the mansion's aura of dread, blending the supernatural with human intent in ways that made it impossible to disentangle reality from legend. The human drama became increasingly apparent as well. The missing individual, once the focus of anxiety and speculation, had left subtle traces, items, misplaced notes, half-written, a diary entry hinting at knowledge too dangerous to disclose. Investigators realized that the person may have been both observer and participant in the events leading to their disappearance. Fear, power, and secrecy created an environment in which truth was a shifting entity shaped by the intentions of those who sought to hide it and the fears of those who sought to reveal it. Among the recovered letters and journals, cryptic references hinted at external influences, political figures, financiers, and family rivals whose interest in the Vandermeer estate may have contributed to the deliberate concealment of key facts. Each document suggested motives intertwined with reputation, inheritance, and social dominance. And yet the full extent of these interactions remained hidden, buried under layers of obfuscation, destruction, and silence. The fact layer suggested a conspiracy not only of family but of society woven into the fabric of power itself. Neighborhood testimony added texture and a chilling immediacy. Observers reported glimpsing figures that seemed to watch from windows, hearing footsteps in rooms that should have been empty, and sensing presences that defied explanation. Folklore here acted not only as embellishment but as psychological amplification, lending weight to the already tense environment. The mansion was at once a stage for human behavior and a character in its own right, shaping events as much as responding to them. In resolving the immediate mysteries, certain elements became clear. The disappearance had been facilitated, perhaps even orchestrated by human hands. The Vandermeer family's control, the strategic use of servants, the manipulation of evidence, all pointed to deliberate concealment. But the edges of the truth remained frayed with pieces that could not be located, statements that could not be reconciled, and shadows that seemed to linger where light should have prevailed. The resolution was partial, the payoff compelling, yet incomplete. The interplay between human actions and supernatural suggestion remained a defining feature. Witnesses could not explain why doors opened when no one approached, why faint voices echoed through empty rooms, or why the mansion seemed to pulsate with life of its own. Folklore and fact layer intertwined seamlessly, creating a narrative in which the known and unknown coexisted, leaving investigators, residents, and future readers in a state of uneasy fascination. Ultimately, the mansion stood as both evidence and enigma. Human motivations, hidden agendas, and the exercise of power collided with legend, rumor, and fear. The truth was partially revealed, yet it remained tantalizingly beyond full comprehension. Objects were recovered, testimonies recorded, and patterns observed, but the most essential details, the absolute nature of the disappearance and the full extent of the family's secrets, remained shrouded. The payoff was a revelation of complexity, of darkness woven into the gilded fabric of human ambition. As the city resumed its rhythms, the Vandermeer mansion remained a locus of curiosity and dread. Passers-by whispered about lights flickering in the windows, faint figures glimpsed in shadows, and sounds that seemed to carry across streets in the cold night air. Even those who had never set foot inside felt the mansion's pull, a reminder that wealth and secrecy could harbor horrors far beyond ordinary imagination. Fact and folklore, human intent, and spectral suggestion converged to create a story whose resonance would last for generations. And in that convergence, the documentary reaches its subtle climax. The audience is left suspended between certainty and speculation, drawn into the tension of what was revealed and what remains hidden. The mansion, the family, the missing individual, and the surrounding community are forever bound in a narrative of intrigue, fear, and fascination, a story both human and mythic. The payoff is not tidy, not fully explained, yet it is compelling, an invitation to peer into the shadows and confront the uneasy truths lurking within wealth, power, and secrecy. As the winter fog lifts over New York, the Vandermeer mansion stands silent, imposing and unchanged. The city continues its ceaseless rhythm, carriages rolling along cobblestone streets, merchants calling their wares, the distant echo of church bells marking time. But within the mansion, the shadows remain thick and immovable. The disappearance, the strange events, and the secrets that fueled whispers across Manhattan have left an indelible mark, one that cannot be fully erased by daylight or explanation. The mansion is more than brick wood and gilded ornamentation. It is a repository of fear, power, and human ambition, a space where fact and folklore collide in ways that defy comprehension. Investigators long departed, leaving only notes and partial reports, could only speculate on the final outcomes. The missing individual was never found, their trail ending as abruptly as it began. Objects recovered offered tantalizing hints, but no definitive answers. Letters, journals, and financial ledgers provided glimpses into schemes, debts, and hidden dealings, yet crucial evidence was gone lost to fire manipulation or deliberate concealment. The fact layer is clear in some respects, yet deliberately opaque in others, leaving questions unanswered, suspicions unresolved, and fears unassuaged. The folklore, however, has endured. Stories of shadowed figures lingering in upper rooms, of faint cries echoing through empty halls, and of candle flames snuffed by unseen hands persist to this day. Tavern tales whispered among generations embellish the legend, merging memory and imagination. The mansion has become a character in its own right, a symbol of the dangerous allure of power, the fragility of human morality, and the persistence of secrets long buried. Even those who never entered its halls feel the weight of its presence, a reminder that wealth and privilege can harbor horrors hidden from plain sight. Within the family itself, ambiguity reigns. Descendants and distant relatives speak cautiously, omitting details or contradicting one another. The patriarch's reputation remains complex, both admired for acumen and feared for ruthlessness. Some claim that the family never intended harm, that the disappearance was an unfortunate consequence of human error or fear. Others insist that every step was deliberate, every action calculated to conceal truths that would shame or destroy them. These conflicting accounts ensure that the story remains unresolved, hauntingly incomplete, a narrative that invites endless speculation. As the audience reflects on the events, it becomes apparent that the true horror lies not only in the disappearance or the unexplained phenomena, but in the convergence of human ambition, secrecy, and the unknown. The mansion, the family, and the city around it form a network of intertwined destinies, illustrating how power can distort perception, how fear can manipulate behavior, and how mystery can thrive in the shadows of wealth. Folklore and fact continue their delicate dance, leaving observers suspended in a tension between belief and skepticism, reality and legend. Even decades later, the mansion draws attention, curiosity, and unease. Tourists, historians, and ghost hunters alike seek to glimpse the hidden halls, the locked rooms, the spaces where past and present intersect. Each visit adds new stories, some credible, some fanciful, but all contributing to the ongoing narrative of intrigue. The Vandermeer Mansion has transcended its physicality, becoming a symbol of human fascination with the unknown, the dangerous, and the forbidden. And yet, for all that has been uncovered, the ultimate truth remains elusive. Who orchestrated the disappearance? Were the events purely human in origin, or was there something more spectral, a force that lingered beyond comprehension? What motives truly drove the family, and how many secrets remain locked behind doors that have never been opened? The answers may never be known. The shadows of the mansion, the echoes of the vanished, and the whispers of those who witnessed or imagined it continue to haunt long after the gas lamps have dimmed. It is here at the edge of certainty and speculation that the story pauses, leaving the audience suspended. Between what was discovered and what remains hidden, the line between human intent and legend blurs. Every creaking floorboard, every shadow, every fragment of testimony reminds us that history is not merely a record of events, but a landscape where fear, power, and mystery intersect. The Vandermeer Mansion and the events that unfolded within are forever etched into the collective consciousness, a cautionary tale of secrecy, ambition, and the shadows that lurk in the gilded corners of human lives. If you feel the chill of that winter night, the weight of unseen eyes, and the tension of secrets barely revealed, then you have glimpsed only a fraction of the mansion's legacy. There is more to uncover, more to imagine, and more to fear. And so the story continues in whispers, in shadows, in the imaginations of those who dare to peer into the past. You have just witnessed one chapter of the Vandermeer saga. If you wish to explore further, to unravel more hidden histories, And to confront the dark truths that linger in forgotten mansions and vanished streets, subscribe to channel name and join us as we journey into the shadows. Because in history, some secrets refuse to remain buried and some mysteries are too compelling to ignore.